The mystery unfolds. The enigma of the Somerton Man. The discovery. It was a serene morning on December 1st, 1948, when the soft light of dawn kissed the shores of Somerton Beach, a quiet stretch of coastline near Adelaide, South Australia. The waves whispered against the sand, and seagulls drifted lazily across the sky. But as the morning wore on, this picturesque scene would be marred by a discovery that would plunge the area into one of the most baffling mysteries of the 20th century. At around 6:30 a.m., John Lyons, a local jeweller, and his wife were walking along the beach when they noticed something strange near the seawall. There, slumped against the cold stone, was the body of a man. He was well dressed in a smartly tailored suit, with polished shoes and a crisp, clean shirt. His legs were outstretched, his feet crossed casually at the ankles, as if he had simply decided to sit and watch the ocean. His head was resting against the wall, and a half-smoked cigarette lay on his collar, as though it had fallen from his mouth just moments before. The man's appearance was eerily peaceful, almost as if he were merely sleeping. But as Lyons and his wife drew closer, they realized that something was very wrong. The man was completely still, his skin unnaturally pale. Alarmed, they quickly summoned the police, who arrived on the scene within minutes. The initial impression was that the man had died of natural causes, perhaps a heart attack or stroke. But as the investigation progressed, it became clear that this was no ordinary death. The man carried no identification, no wallet, no papers, nothing that could reveal who he was. Even more perplexing, his pockets were devoid of any personal items, except for a few commonplace objects. An unused train ticket from Adelaide to Henley Beach, a bus ticket from the city, a small metal comb, a pack of juicy fruit chewing gum, a packet of Army Club cigarettes containing a different brand of cigarettes called Kenzitas, and a quarter-full box of Bryant and May matches. All these items were unremarkable, but their presence seemed oddly deliberate, as if someone had carefully curated what the man would carry in his final moments. The mystery only deepened when the man's clothing was examined more closely. Every label had been meticulously removed, leaving no trace of where his suit, shirt, or even his underwear had come from. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine, suggesting he had not walked far before his death, yet no one could recall seeing him enter the beach. It was as if he had simply appeared out of nowhere, a phantom deposited by the tide. As the body was taken away for an autopsy, the questions began to multiply. Who was this man? How had he ended up on Somerton Beach? And most disturbingly, why did he carry nothing that could identify him? The case was already unusual, but it was about to take a turn that would elevate it from a local curiosity to an international enigma. Initial investigation. The autopsy, conducted later that day at the Royal Adelaide Hospital, was expected to provide some answers. Dr. John Barclay Bennett, the pathologist who examined the body, was immediately struck by the man's physical condition. He appeared to be in his early 40s, of average height and well built. His hair was ginger brown, and he had the appearance of someone who had lived a relatively comfortable life. There were no signs of external injuries, no marks of violence, and nothing to suggest a struggle. But as Dr. Bennett delved deeper, the mystery only intensified. The man's organs were in a state of acute congestion, particularly the stomach, liver, spleen, and kidneys. The blood vessels around his brain were similarly congested, and his heart was distended, though there was no evidence of heart disease. Such symptoms were indicative of poisoning, but despite extensive tests, no trace of poison could be found. Bennett noted that the man's last meal appeared to have been a pasty, eaten 3 to 4 hours before his death, but there were no signs of any toxic substances in his stomach. It was as though the man had simply ceased to live, his body shutting down without leaving any clue as to why. The lack of an obvious cause of death stumped investigators. Poisoning remained the most likely explanation, yet the absence of any detectable substance was baffling. Some speculated that the man had been exposed to a rare or untraceable poison, perhaps one used by professional assassins. Others suggested a more exotic explanation. The man might have been the victim of some kind of nerve agent or radioactive substance, though this theory was quickly dismissed due to the lack of supporting evidence. As the investigation continued, the police explored every possible avenue to identify the man. Fingerprints were taken and sent to every English-speaking country, but no match was found. The man's photograph was circulated widely, and his description was broadcast across Australia and beyond, yet no one came forward to claim him. It was as if the man had been a ghost, living a life unrecorded by any official means. The only potential lead came from the clothes themselves. Although the labels had been removed, police discovered that the stitching on one of the man's pockets had a particular type of thread that was not available in Australia, suggesting that his suit may have been tailored overseas, perhaps in America. This was an intriguing clue, but it led to a dead end. The trail was cold, and the man's identity remained as elusive as ever. With no name, no cause of death, and no apparent reason for the man to have been on Somerton Beach, the case was quickly running out of leads. But then, in early January 1949, a discovery was made that would catapult the investigation into the realm of the bizarre. The cryptic clues. On January 14th, 1949, nearly 6 weeks after the body had been found, the police made a startling announcement. They had discovered a small rolled-up piece of paper hidden in a fob pocket sewn into the waistband of the man's trousers, a pocket so well concealed that it had initially been overlooked. The scrap of paper was tiny, measuring just a few centimeters in length. But what was written on it would soon become one of the most famous phrases in Australian criminal history. The paper bore the words Tamam Shud, written in an elegant script. Translated from Persian, the phrase means, "It is finished," or "the end." It was immediately clear that these words had been torn from a larger document, but what that document was, and why it had been hidden in the dead man's clothing, remained a mystery. The discovery of the Tamam Shud paper sent shockwaves through the investigation. It was a cryptic and unsettling clue, one that seemed to suggest a deliberate and carefully planned act. But what was its significance? The police scoured libraries and bookshops, searching for any reference to the phrase. Finally, they found what they were looking for. The words had been torn from the final page of a book, a rare edition of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a collection of poetry by the 12th century Persian philosopher and mathematician. The Rubaiyat was an unusual choice of reading material for a man found dead on an Australian beach. It was a book filled with themes of fate, death, and the fleeting nature of life, philosophical reflections that seemed to echo the mysterious circumstances surrounding the man's death. But the discovery of the Rubaiyat only deepened the mystery. What connection did this book have to the man? And why had he chosen, or been forced, to carry this particular passage to his grave? The police knew they had to find the original book from which the page had been torn. A nationwide search was launched, with appeals in newspapers and on the radio. Days turned into weeks, and it seemed that the lead would go cold. But then, in July 1949, a breakthrough occurred. A man walked into the police station in Glenelg, a suburb of Adelaide, with a surprising story. The man, who wished to remain anonymous, explained that shortly after the Somerton man's body had been discovered, he had found a book in the back seat of his car, which had been parked near Somerton Beach. The book was a copy of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. At first, he had thought nothing of it, assuming it had been left by a previous passenger. But when he heard about the police search, he realized that this could be the book they were looking for. The police eagerly examined the book, and their excitement grew when they found that the final page was missing. The torn edge of the remaining page matched perfectly with the Tamam Shud scrap found on the Somerton Man, confirming that this was indeed the source of the mysterious phrase. But the book held another secret, one that would take the investigation into even stranger territory. The Rubaiyat. Inside the back cover of the Rubaiyat, written in faint pencil, was a series of letters arranged in 5 lines. At first glance, they appeared to be random, but closer examination revealed that they were likely a code, a cryptic message left by the Somerton Man, or perhaps by someone connected to his death. The letters read as follows: Borgo arbabd, emlai oi, butibim panep, emlia boya kusi it mtsamstegab. To the untrained eye, these letters were nothing more than a jumbled sequence. But to those familiar with codes and ciphers, they suggested something far more sinister. The police consulted with experts, including members of the Australian Navy, who were experienced in deciphering codes. However, despite their best efforts, the meaning of the letters remained elusive. The code, if that is what it was, defied all attempts at decryption, and to this day, its meaning has never been conclusively determined. The presence of the code, combined with the Rubaiyat and the Tamam Shud scrap, led some to speculate that the Somerton Man was involved in espionage. The late 1940s were the early days of the Cold War, a time when spies and secret agents operated in the shadows, passing messages through clandestine means. Could the Somerton Man have been a spy, caught up in a deadly game of cat and mouse? Was the code a message meant for his handlers? Or was it a final note left behind by a man who knew he was about to die? Adding to the intrigue, the book also contained a telephone number, scribbled in the same faint pencil as the code. The number belonged to a woman named Jo Thompson, who lived in Glenelg, not far from where the Somerton Man had been found. Jo, who was often referred to by the pseudonym Jestin in media reports, was a nurse in her late 20s. When questioned by the police, she claimed to have no knowledge of the dead man, or how her phone number ended up in the book. However, she did admit to owning a copy of the Rubaiyat, which she had given to a man named Alf Boxall during World War II as a gesture of friendship. Boxall, who was alive and well when contacted by the police, still had the book that Jo had given him. Its final page was intact, ruling out any direct connection to the Somerton Man's copy. But when Jo was shown a plaster cast of the Somerton Man's face, she reportedly reacted with visible shock, though she quickly regained her composure and denied recognizing him. Some investigators believed she knew more than she was letting on, but without further evidence, there was little they could do. The connection to Jo Thompson, however tenuous, opened up new avenues of speculation. Some theorized that the Somerton Man had been romantically involved with Jo, and that his death was the result of a tragic love affair. Perhaps he had been a spurned lover, driven to suicide by despair. Or maybe he had been poisoned by a jealous rival, or even by Jo herself, though there was no proof to support such claims. The mystery deepened, but no solid answers were forthcoming. As the investigation stalled, the case began to attract international attention. The combination of a dead man with no identity, a cryptic code, a rare book, and the suggestion of espionage was too tantalizing for the public to resist. Newspapers around the world reported on the case, and amateur sleuths offered their own theories, ranging from the plausible to the fantastical. But as the years passed, the Somerton Man remained unidentified, his secrets locked away in the silence of the grave. Possible identities. With the trail growing cold, speculation about the Somerton Man's identity became increasingly wild. Some believed he was a foreigner, possibly from Eastern Europe or the Middle East, who had travelled to Australia on a secret mission. His unusual clothing, the removed labels, and the apparent code all pointed to a man who had lived a life of secrecy. But if he was a spy, which side was he on? And who had betrayed him? One theory posited that the Somerton Man was a Soviet agent sent to Australia to gather intelligence on the British and American military presence in the region. Adelaide was home to several sensitive installations, including a rocket testing facility at Woomera, and it was not unreasonable to think that foreign powers might have had an interest in the area. The Rubaiyat could have been a cipher book used to encode messages, and the Tamam Shud note a signal that his mission was complete, or that his life was over. If this theory is true, the man's death might have been the result of a failed operation, either at the hands of enemy agents or as a form of sanctioned execution. Another theory, less dramatic but equally compelling, suggested that the Somerton Man was involved in criminal activities. Australia in the 1940s had its share of organised crime, including drug smuggling and black market trading. The man's refined appearance could have been a front, hiding a darker side. Perhaps he had double-crossed his partners, and his death was a warning to others who might consider doing the same. The Rubaiyat and the Code might have been part of a criminal communication network, with the Tamam Shud note signifying the end of a deal or the end of a life. There was also the possibility that the Somerton Man had a more personal story, one involving love and loss. The connection to Joe Thompson, while not fully understood, hinted at a relationship that might have ended tragically. Could the man have been Joe's former lover, returning to Adelaide after the war only to find that she had moved on? If so, his death could have been a final act of despair, with the Tamam Shud note serving as a poetic farewell. The code in the Rubaiyat might have been a message meant for Joe, something only she could decipher, though if she ever did, she kept its meaning to herself. The Somerton Man's identity has also been linked to several missing persons cases from around the world. Over the years, there have been numerous claims that the man was someone who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. But none of these claims have been conclusively proven. The most famous of these was the suggestion that the Somerton Man was a man named H.C. Reynolds, based on a similarity between the Somerton Man's photograph and an identification card from the 1920s. However, this theory was later debunked when it was discovered that Reynolds had a different eye colour. In 2013, genetic analysis of hair samples taken from the plaster cast of the Somerton Man suggested that he may have had European, possibly Scandinavian, ancestry. This finding raised new questions about his origins, but without a DNA match, it remains just another piece of the puzzle. Who was he, really? Was he a soldier, a spy, a criminal, or simply a man with a broken heart? The lack of concrete evidence has allowed these theories to flourish, each one as compelling as the last, but none providing the final answer. The lingering questions and theories of darkness. Despite extensive investigation, the identity of the Somerton Man remains unknown to this day. As the years have passed, the mystery has only deepened, giving rise to a number of unsettling theories that suggest a much darker story lurking beneath the surface. One of the most persistent theories is that the Somerton Man was involved in espionage. The Cold War was just beginning, and Adelaide was a hub of military activity, including a nearby British rocket testing facility. The removal of his clothing labels, the presence of an unbreakable code in the Rubaiyat, and the man's overall demeanour have led many to believe he was a spy, possibly caught up in a web of international intrigue. If true, his death might have been a carefully orchestrated murder, his body left on the beach as a message or a warning. Another theory, equally chilling, suggests that the Somerton Man was the victim of a crime of passion. The mysterious connection to the woman known only as Jestin has fueled speculation that he may have been involved in a doomed love affair. Some believe he was poisoned by a jealous rival, or even by Jestin herself, who might have had reasons to keep their relationship a secret. The use of a rare and undetectable poison could explain the autopsy's inconclusive results, leaving behind a death that appears almost natural, but carries the hallmarks of a meticulously planned murder. Others have ventured into even darker territory, proposing that the Somerton Man was involved in organised crime or an illicit smuggling operation gone wrong. In this version of events, the Tamam Shud scrap could have been a cryptic signal, marking the end of a deal, a life, or perhaps even a chapter in a hidden criminal history. The silence surrounding his identity might have been enforced by fear, those who knew him choosing to remain in the shadows rather than risk the wrath of a dangerous syndicate. As forensic technology has advanced, there have been renewed efforts to uncover the truth. In 2021, the Somerton Man's body was exhumed, and DNA analysis was conducted in the hope of finally cracking the case. However, as of now, these efforts have not provided conclusive answers, and the mystery remains as enigmatic as ever. The case of the Somerton Man continues to haunt investigators, historians, and the public alike. It stands as a stark reminder that some secrets resist even the most determined efforts to uncover them. Who was this man? Was he a pawn in a deadly game of espionage, a lover caught in a tragic romance, or a victim of a shadowy underworld? Each theory is as compelling as it is unsettling, and the absence of definitive answers only adds to the case's eerie allure. The Somerton Man story is a puzzle with pieces forever missing, a ghostly enigma that lingers in the collective memory of those who dare to seek the truth. The haunting image of the man on the beach, peaceful yet inscrutable, serves as a reminder that some mysteries are destined to remain unsolved, shrouded in darkness, and perhaps that is where they truly belong.